Hope you had a good weekend, and if you didn't, well, it's not our fault. It's one of those few things in life in Canada that's not the fault of Sun News. All of you have seen the devastation in Calgary. Many of you have friends and family there. Most of you are incredulous at the pain and the suffering. So if you were to write something about what has happened, you might start off with an acknowledgement of the grief, an expression of empathy and compassion. Or you might write in the Huffington Post, and I quote, "It seems hardly a week goes by when we don't hear some climatologists or other experts say it's difficult to connect one particular weather event to global warming, but we heard it this week as communities in Calgary and southern Alberta were evacuated in the face of extreme rainfall and rising floodwaters. The but, of course, is that we know burning fossil fuels and pumping carbon dioxide and other heat-trapping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere causes the Earth's average surface temperatures to rise." So, who do you think said that? Well, hold on a moment. First, we know nothing of the sort. Nothing of the sort at all. It's absolute nonsense. But yeah, I bet you got it right. Publicly funded, lord of arrogance, master of rudeness, David Suzuki. As the people of Calgary try to come to terms with their loss, and it must be incredible for them, little Suzuki tries to exploit the situation with his theories about global warming. They are only theories. But when we look at the history of climate, the history of natural disaster, we see nothing at all surprising in what has happened. There is nothing new in this flooding, and nature has always worked in circles and cycles. Certainly the air pollution in China, yeah, David, those good old communists you love so much, from outdated and irresponsibly built power plants has created a soup over East Asia, and some of that does move here, but that's not the cause either. Part of the problem of all this is that people today are so, well, indoctrinated. They blame anything, everything on certain key causes. George Bush, the Tea Party, Stephen Harper, capitalism, and yeah, climate change. And Suzuki is abetted in all this by his chums at the CBC, all paid huge amounts of money to spread their propaganda.
I want to start by telling you something. The world, the one that you live in, coming to an end. You may have heard about it. Major environmental report came out of Britain this week. It's actually done by a former economist at the World Bank, a man by the name of Nicholas Stern. And it actually takes a look at what you would think, right, the effects of climate change and what it could have on us in our lifetimes. And man, the report paints a bit of a scary picture about what's in store for us if we actually don't get this whole damn climate thing under control and fast. Let's get you right into it, a bit of a glimpse. A worldwide economic slowdown on a scale similar to that of the, oh goodness, the Great Depression.
And people actually watching your show, George. Look, you're a nice guy. I do like you on a personal level. But you just gave your gas-guzzling pickup to a buddy, didn't you? Because you have too many cars. Ouch. And you're flying down to Los Angeles for your disastrous CNN show on a regular basis. Climate change, old boy? After the propaganda comes, well, who else would it be?
David Suzuki, how are you?
Good to be here.
Things are all right with you?
Yeah.
Excellent. Just got back from Australia, right?
7 weeks.
We'll talk about that in just a bit.
Sure.
Okay, the Clean Air Act, the government plan. We've heard a lot of people weigh in on it. What do you think of it?
Well, I mean, the pundits all made their pronouncements. It's a joke.
Yeah, a pithy one, I suppose. Australia, Mr. Suzuki, there and back is what, 48 hours of flight? Then generalizations yet again about the pundits. Which ones? Who? Where? And naturally, George doesn't say a word. Look, even the terminology is false and mutable. It was global warming, then global cooling, and now, so as to hedge their bets, it's climate change. Well, of course, climate changes, and then changes back again. But instead of looking at genuine reasons, we grasp at reassuring scapegoats. You know, it's fascinating that when, I don't know, an evangelical or fundamentalist leader blames disasters on God's judgment, we scream and we laugh, ha 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 ha. But when eco-fanatics blame disasters on their God of nature, their pantheist God, we purr in agreement. But in this case, it's worse than bad science. It's positively bloody cruel. And it's always about Suzuki, isn't it? He injects himself into issue after issue because he is more in love with the cult of David than any particular cause he purports to embrace. Say what you will about some of those Hollywood celebrity do-gooders. Many of them do get their hands dirty. They do get involved. They may be naive, but you know what? They're consistent. They try. Suzuki, it's not in his nature of things, is it? But boy, you should see him discussing speaking fees with boy Trudeau. To the people of Calgary and the rest of Alberta, We care. We here care, even if the chattering classes don't. David Suzuki. You know, but when I came to Canada in 1987, I worked for the CBC. I knew 790 Bay Street, and the nature of things, his show was, I think, 2 floors above where I was at Man Alive. I used to see him around. I'm not going to say anything. Lorrie Goldstein, how many books have you read about global warming and climate change?
About 45.
Oh, you poor sod. Now, apart from the science of it, the timing is so atrocious. People are desperate. They're weeping. They're broken in Calgary. And Suzuki says, whoa, climate change, you see.
Yeah, the first thing I would say, because the show goes across Canada, particularly into that area, is ignore Mr. Suzuki. Yeah. Your concern now is recovering and burying the dead and rebuilding the city. The second thing I want to say is that none of this is your fault. The idea that anyone would take one weather event and link it to anthropogenic, man-made climate change is absurd.
Well said.
Real scientists don't do it. Yeah. The final thing, I could just as easily have done a piece in the wake of this blaming Dr. Suzuki. Why? He has more than one child. And we know the population is a real draw on resources. This is the kind of stupidity of this gameplay. This is not about blame. This is a tragedy. It may be a once-in-a-century event. The real challenge for people in Alberta is going to be to rebuild their infrastructure better. In Toronto, for example, we had a once-in-a-century event, Hurricane Hazel, killed a lot of people. There is now a whole network of conservation lands and waterways to prevent that from happening again. Winnipeg had the same problem, rebuilt their infrastructure. That's what they should focus on. On the science of climate change, well, number one, there's been a pause. Everybody now acknowledges there's been a pause in global warming. Years ago, people like you and me who said there was a pause, we were dismissed as lunatics.
Everybody does?
Everybody accepts there's a pause. What the climate scientists say is it doesn't negate the theory. I see. And that may well be true. But what is happening is that the climate is acting in a different way from what the early climate models predicted. The second thing to remember is that the climate has been changing for billions and billions of years. Yep. We've had 5 major extinctions, all before man appeared, let alone burned any fossil fuels. So the climate changes. What we're talking about is a theoretical difference between the bad weather we would have if it was just natural climate change, as opposed to natural climate change plus what we're adding to the atmosphere. That's a very esoteric debate. The real issue is that weather does bad things from time to time. And the real challenge in countries like our own is to build our infrastructure better to withstand these kinds of things.
It should have been the article that Suzuki wrote. We're going to show a clip here because although in a way I suppose it's a trivial juxtaposition, he will stop at nothing, and we know what this is about. It's about money. It's about fundraising. Yeah. He needs huge amounts of money. I'm not saying he's taking it to go and party, but he needs it to sustain and maintain his organizations, his websites, his businesses. Let's have a look at this clip now, please.
This is David Suzuki live from the North Pole. Climate change has forced Santa to pack up his sleigh and find a new home. This holiday season, make Santa's wish come true. With a gift you buy here, you'll help him set up a temporary workshop until he can return. Of course, you know, we really won't be sending stuff to Santa. You'll receive a tax receipt for 100% of your gift purchase.
Considering how political he is, I'm not sure how he gets that tax receipt. But I know many people who at Christmas, we don't do it, we just spoil the kids, but they will say, you know what, one present less, but we're going to give something to a child in the third world. But to give to David Suzuki?
Well, to give to an organization whose job is to keep the noise level up about it. You know, I would call Dr. Suzuki a first world problem. People in the third world have much bigger problems than worrying about whether the ocean's going to rise as it has for millions and millions of years. There was a Calgary, let me credit a competitor, a Calgary Herald reporter,
good paper,
who in the wake of this, and the stuff, I don't know if it was specifically about Dr. Suzuki, but obviously the things were humming about climate change. He wrote I think his name was Van Russell. He wrote a tweet that said, anybody who mentions climate change or the oil sands for the next few days gets punched, okay? and while I would not encourage anybody to do that, what I would say is that is the dismissive tone one needs when these people don't live in the real world. People have died. Calgary, half of Calgary's underwater. What I think Canadians want is they want their government to be in there to help. This is one of the things that we have armies for. We don't just have armies to fight war.
Of course.
I want my money, my federal tax dollars, to go and help my Albertans, just as I wanted it to help Quebecers during the ice storm. I think that's how Canadians are. And a lot of people are volunteering and sending money. Yeah. Those are the people who will come up with the long-term solutions to what's wrong. This was not only a silly thing to say, I'm amazed that nobody in that organization said, David, not now. Wait.
I'm not actually. I'm not amazed. I think the purview is so... I'm so glad you use that phrase, first world problem. Our daughter works at Starbucks in a very nice area. And whenever people say, look, there's still some foam left. And I said, no foam. She always says to me, first world problems, Dad. Yeah, first world problems. Suzuki, I don't know what to say. You know what? Thank goodness you're on this brief. You do it so well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.